when we perceive multiple realities at the same time, the best way I can describe it is overlays, because that's what it is. All frequencies exist simultaneously. They are not linear like a ladder, like a lot of us like to place it on, but the human mind has a hard time, and we need to sometimes put things into a linear fashion for the brain to understand, for the mind to understand. And so we think, fifth dimension, sixth dimension, seventh dimension, eighth dimension, we see it as a hierarchy when that is not the case. It is more of an expanded state.
Hello, my loves. This is Johanna Burkhardt. I am a multi-dimensional channel, teacher, healer, and author. And I am obsessed with all things metaphysical, esoteric, galactic, and of course, the healing journey. And I'm here to share my stories, my wisdom, and my teachings about being human in the illusion that we call reality. Welcome to Cosmic Blonde.
Hello, my loves. Today we are going to talk about multidimensionality and living while perceiving multiple time-space realities simultaneously, and kind of what that looks like and what that feels like, because more of us are going to move in to that fifth dimensional frequency and are going to begin to experience this more viscerally. And it can be a little bit disorienting in the beginning. It can make you feel manic. It can make you feel like you're losing your mind, which ironically is exactly what you're doing. It's just discerning the difference between losing your mind, right? Because the mind is a very limited human construct, and we are limitless beings. And so I want to start first by saying that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And this is important because a lot of times we seek spiritual experiences when the reality is you can make anything a spiritual experience, because you are a spiritual being and we are meant to have human experiences. We are meant to live and enjoy the physical reality, but we are meant to bring the limitless potential, the limitless knowing, the higher awareness, the wisdom of the higher versions of ourselves, for lack of a better way of placing it, terming it, and grounding it into the physical form. This is what it means to be a bridge for humanity, which is something that I am. And not everybody will be a bridge. A lot of people will move completely into the fifth dimensional frequency and embody the fifth dimensional frequency and choose to stay there. And others will embody the fifth dimensional frequency and return back into, say, a fourth dimensional plane or a third dimensional plane and be a beacon of light and just be someone who raises the frequency of the planet. And then you have people like me and a lot of shamans out there as well. And some of you know, who have followed me for a long time, I branded myself as a soul shaman for a long time because I come from a lineage of shamans, and I practiced it for some time. But that's what a shaman is. It's a bridge between worlds, because they are meant to help people to tap into their awareness, right? Those other versions of themselves that are much more expanded, that are much more limitless, and help them to anchor that into their physical form and help bridge them and help them integrate into those higher frequencies and help people across that bridge, right? Because it is a bridge, it is a threshold. And there are certain things that you have to integrate and embody to get to that space. And so as the planet moves into the fifth dimensional frequency, whether you do or not, it doesn't matter. As the planet does, you and others are going to start experiencing more versions of yourself, more realities simultaneously. And that's what I kind of want to talk about a little bit today, to really try to make it as simple as possible. This is a very esoteric and quantum conversation. So if I lose you, just listen and allow the frequencies to be absorbed and allow it to settle. And you might have an aha moment or an understanding later on. And maybe this is where the information gets seated, or where We kind of help you find where that lives inside of you and help you translate that for yourself, right? Because the translation can be a multitude of ways. I'm just here to kind of awaken that information inside of you. When we perceive multiple realities at the same time, the best way I can describe it is overlays, because that's what it is. All frequencies exist simultaneously. They are not linear like a ladder, like a lot of us like to place it on, but the human mind has a hard time, and we need to sometimes put things into a linear fashion for the brain to understand, for the mind to understand. And so we think, fifth dimension, sixth dimension, seventh dimension, eighth dimension, we see it as a hierarchy when that is not the case. It is more of an expanded state. And each frequency is a dimension, and each dimension has its limitations. It has the things that it's best at, what it's known for, right? And again, its limitations. And as we expand out further, we move into a more expanded space, a higher dimension. So it's more about expansion than it is higher or lower than, right? Hierarchy is a very human thing. But the best way to describe dimensions and frequencies, because each dimension is a frequency, is a radio station. And this is something that the guides continuously have used for years as a metaphor. But it's just you tuning into that and having an experience and feeling that frequency, the experience that it's going to give you, and accessing the information that's available to you. So just like you turn to a channel on a TV or to a station on a radio, you are tuning into a frequency, right? It is legit a radio wave. So it's all a frequency anyway. It's the same thing that's happening when you are moving between realities and versions of yourself. They are you simultaneously living on multiple frequencies, multiple dimensions, multiple time-space realities, all at the same time. Time is a human construct. It is not real. There's no past lives. There are no future lives. Everything is happening right now. And in this human timeline, there are multiple versions of you living the same story, slightly different. Oftentimes people call this the Mandela effect, because that's what it is. In one timeline and frequency, I'm just going to use the Bernstein Bears. It's spelled one way, and in another dimension and frequency, it's spelled another. That's the subtle differences. And when people start to experience these Mandela effects, they are starting to open up to their multidimensionality, and they're starting to experience multiple time-space realities simultaneously, because they still remember the other time-space reality, but the one that they're currently in is different, but they hold both awarenesses. And this is a simplified understanding to help you see. Another thing that's important to understand is you can sometimes experience them all at the same time in a more visceral way. Like, for example, I was at a restaurant not that long ago. The restaurant was very loud. It was a lot of people. I was in a party with a lot of people. And while I was very much in the physical reality of it and having the experience, I was also simultaneously aware of another version of me who was holding a higher level of awareness and who was observing the same experience from a higher perspective. And the reason why it's so important for us to embody and be able to do that is because it keeps us out of judgment, which is a very human thing. Judgment is different than discernment. You can, quote unquote, judge somebody or judge a situation and knowing it's not for you and that you don't agree with it. It's not something that you align to. You don't resonate with it. That is not judgment, in my opinion. That's discernment. You're discerning that that is not something that's for you. It's not an alignment for you. It's not a good relationship for you. It's not something you would do. It doesn't resonate for you. And then there's judgment, where you are making something you see, hear, or feel mean something about that person, AKA also meaning something about you. Meaning it's not, sometimes we judge people because we secretly wish we could do that, or that we were free enough to do that, or free enough to be that way. Or sometimes we judge people because we feel like it's not, that's not available to us. So we judge them. It's a projection. If you're someone who judges a lot, you judge yourself a lot. So within, so without, right? So when we're able to tap into the versions of ourselves that are living in a different frequency, that hold a higher level of awareness at a more expanded state, we have more compassion and we don't judge as easily because we can see that they're perfect where they are. And while it may not be something that we would do, or it's not something that aligns for us, we understand that that is where they are and that's where they need to be and at their level of awareness. You can only do what you can with what you've got with where you are. So it helps us when we can hold that higher awareness. So there is this version of me that's having a very physical experience. There's the version of me that I'm observing that is observing the situation from a different experience. And then there's this other version of me, maybe an inner child who's seeing this situation, experiencing the situation from a whole nother perspective. And I was able to shift in between these different versions of me all at the same time, all while still having my human experience. And nobody ever knew, right? Because I am just in observation mode and shifting between frequencies and looking at all these different perspectives and going, yeah, okay, yep, okay. And just kind of looking at it all. Where we can get into trouble is when we don't have the ability to discern. And this is why I'm such a huge teacher of learn discernment, learn how to read your energy, learn how you know the difference between your intuition, your fear, when you are moving through different time space realities. It is not something that you learn quickly, but this is something that I teach religiously in courses and in private mentorship because I believe it is a foundation. And without that foundation, you are very ungrounded and you are very unstable inside of yourself. And so having the ability to do this is something that comes super easily for me. But it also allows me to teach it very easily. Anyway, you can sometimes feel like you're losing your mind, as I said before, but there's a difference between losing your mind and losing your mind. So one version of losing your mind is going crazy, needing to be on prescription drugs, thinking you are insane, maybe even going into a mental institution, becoming super manic. And I still have manic episodes sometimes. And then there's losing your mind, where you let go of the limitations of the mind. You don't take anything super seriously. You don't take anything for other than what it is as an experience, and nothing dictates anything. It's just an experience, and you're just so in a surrendered state that you just flow with it. There's no attachment. There's no meaning, which is what attachment and meaning I feel like are one and the same. And it just allows you to have an experience. And one allows you to tap into the limitless potential of who you are and what you're able to co-create, because we create our reality through a co-creative experience. So sometimes we cannot control the cards that we're dealt, but how we play them is our free will, because our free will is not what we think it is. And so with that understanding, your reaction or response is what is going to create your experience, which is how we create our reality. So again, having that discernment of what's happening within you is going to be very beneficial, because as we move forward, more and more people are going to start living multidimensionally. And a lot of people are going to need help understanding what's happening and how to work with it and how to navigate it. And that's where people like I come in. And so this is kind of the start of that, by having another conversation about multidimensionality. There are times when I'm driving and I will cross an intersection, and in my mind's eye, I will see me getting in an accident, and oftentimes having the very visceral feeling as well. Some people say, oh, maybe that's a past life. Sure, could be. Or it could just be another version of me in this reality that had an accident there. And by observing it and witnessing it and not reacting to it, I'm not going into fear. I'm integrating it. I'm accepting it. I'm just seeing it for what it is. And it's something that now becomes wisdom, right? So there's these types of things that can happen. The frustrating part about this can be when you were in one dimension, right, which is a frequency, when you're in one frequency and you buy something, or you write something, or you send a message, or you meet somebody, or have an experience, and then you shift a day, a week, a month later, and you're like, I know I bought that thing. I know I met this person. I know I had that experience, but there's nothing in that dimension, that frequency that suggests that's true. It's because you've shifted. And that shift isn't necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just you tuned into a different frequency and decided you needed to spend some time in that frequency. But you still hold the awareness of what happened in another frequency. And this is when sometimes we go crazy. And that happened to me this morning. I wrote something out weeks ago for this episode. And when I was getting ready to record it, I went searching for my notes. Couldn't find it. And I'm like, well, I fought with it for a minute. I was like, I checked everything. I just recently got a new phone. So I thought maybe it didn't sync. So I turned on my old phone. I checked my laptop. Shit was nowhere to be found. I'm like, well, I am in a different frequency than when I wrote that. Simple as that. And I may never see that again. But this information is still inside of me. So it's just going to be expressed in a different way today. But that can be frustrating. But if you can hold the understanding and the discernment of, oh, that I'm not crazy. That did happen, but it happened in a different frequency. That was a different version of me. And I'm just really aware of that version while still being in this version. And that can be the frustrating part. The amazing part of this, and the thing that has been coming through the strongest lately, the law of attraction is not something that we need to practice, because your soul created a blueprint for you. And that works as a GPS system that is constantly realigning you to your destiny, to the highest potential that exists for you. This is why we have tower moments. This is why energy breaks. This is why things happen. We're like, why did this happen? Because it needed to get you to be on the path that you're supposed to be. So because of that GPS system, we're constantly going to be rerouted. But the other part of this is you're always manifesting. There's never a time that you're not manifesting. And I've been saying this for years. But you're always manifesting who you are, not what you desire. Who are you? This is why the only thing you ever have to do is get out of your own way. And you do that by clearing the density and the limitations and the limiting beliefs and the trauma that is keeping you from embodying the version of you that already exists, that has everything that you are desiring, because you would not have that desire if that version of you did not exist. There are plenty of people that have no desire to be wealthy, that are completely complacent and happy in their life and what they are. And there are some people that had everything. They were born with everything and they can't stand it. And they end up becoming homeless or addicted or whatever, because they had a mission to experience the opposite, right? We're always born into the opposite circumstances of that in which we are meant to go towards, or we would have no fucking desire to go towards it. So when you have a desire, a dream, something that's on your heart that you feel, you're like, I know this is possible for me. I feel it. It's because that version of you already exists and you're starting to tap into that version of yourself. So all you have to do, and this is what a lot of people call quantum leaping, quantum jumping, whatever you want to call it, is tune into the frequency, tune into the version of you and the frequency that that version lives on. And as you start to embody the things that that person would do, say, be, it's going to push on everything that is not that version of you. And that's where the triggers come in. That's where the trauma comes in. That's where the limitations come in. And all of that's happening is so you can see it, feel it, and integrate it. And so you all, with that understanding, shadow work is simple. You just have to be where you are. And whatever comes up, clear it as it comes up. And you clear it by seeing it, witnessing it, observing it, right? So what it means to see it is to observe it, not attach to it, not go down the rabbit hole, not make it something bigger than it is, just to observe it, Feel where it feel all the feels that come up. Notice where it lives in the body and allow yourself to feel it. And it will integrate. Make a new decision. It's that simple. But when you react and fall down the hole, which sometimes needs to happen, then means you have fallen in the hole. You've gotten sucked down back into that old version of yourself. And then, so what do? You don't shame and blame yourself, because that's not going to help. You get out of the hole. You dust yourself off and you keep going. And the next time, maybe you will witness the hole before you step in it. And you'll do that enough times until you're able to observe the hole and walk around it. And just witnessing, oh, there's a hole. I'm not doing that again, but I'm going to feel all the things that come with that hole. As I walk around the hole, I'm going to feel all the things, and that hole is going to solidify, and there will no longer be a hole, because I'm going to choose to respond differently this time. But this makes it easy for us to understand how to tap in and actually manifest the version of ourselves and the reality that we want. It sounds simple. It isn't always simple, depending on how attached you are to your trauma and your density. And for me, that's been a life lesson for me, is detachment. Detaching, surrendering, allowing, rinse, repeat. And when I don't, I suffer. When I don't, my life suffers. I lose money, I lose relationships, and I just get back up and I start again. And I do that on repeat until I won't need to do that anymore. And I needed to say that, because while it is simple to understand, all you have to do is tune into this version of you. What would they do? What does it feel like to be in their energy, to connect to that version of you? How do they walk? How do they talk? How do they eat? What is their daily routine? How would they respond? Knowing that is one thing, but this is why you have to spend time connecting to those versions of you in a different time, space, reality, and another different frequency. And you have to practice until you become it. You have to create a structure around it. And as you do those things, it's going to trigger the things that are not that. And so it is a process. Some people can do it very quickly, but most of the time it's a process, like anything else, that you need to have patience and love for yourself. But all of these versions of you are existing at the same time. And this is why sometimes when we feel inner conflict, it's because we know we're at a crossroads, and we can see a little bit into each timeline and each version of ourselves, and how we would be different, or how we may experience things different, or how we may feel and experience differently. And both of those could be really amazing. And we might have fear that one of them is right and one of them is wrong, or that one might be better than the other. And so we get paralyzed and stuck at a crossroads because we can sense both ones, and we're just not sure which one's the right one for us. But in there, you do know which one's right for you, but it's going to require you to let go of what you've been holding on to. It's going to require you to let go of the version of you that is not that. And so you have to look at what those attachments are and what it means about you if you let that go, because you're never going to let go of something and not get something better or equal, at least. So we need to keep that in mind as well. This is, like I said, something that's going to happen more and more. And so as we become more multidimensional, what we're doing is becoming more self-aware. That's all an awakening is you becoming more aware of self, more aware of versions of you that were already there that you couldn't see or sense before. And those versions of you are important. Sometimes they are versions of you that are from what we would consider a past life, right? A completely other time, space, reality. A version of you from Lemuria, a version of you from the 1800s, a version of you from the future, quote unquote, for future. Or it could be a version of you that's in this timeline, or that's in this time, space, reality, right? But in a different timeline. They made different choices, different decisions. It can also be a version of you that's an inner child. It can be a version of you that's a protector personality. It can be a version of you that is a guide, a spirit guide. There are so many versions of you. and being able to discern what version of you is showing up and what it is there to teach you, what it is trying to show you, is really all it's about. Mindfulness, observing. Again, why most spiritual teachings come back to the practice of mindfulness, come back to the practice of observation instead of detachment. And so if you can witness yourself and observe yourself, you can ask yourself, what did this relationship teach me? What did this business opportunity teach me? What did this job teach me? What did this child teach me? What did this friend teach me? What did this parents teach me about myself? What do I need to learn about that version of myself? Because otherwise it wouldn't be happening. If you can take that wisdom and put it into practice, that version of yourself integrates back into the whole, which is what we consider an ego death. Because we're no longer, it's an ego death because we're no longer feeding that version of ourselves energy. We're allowing it to go dormant and integrate back into the whole. When there's a part of us that is separate, which is what we consider fragmentation, parts work, right? Inner children, ego personalities. These are versions of ourselves that have split, that we are giving and feeding energy to because we're attached to it. There's a story behind it. It means something. So when we go through these ego deaths, we're integrating that back into the whole. But anytime we experience another quote unquote past life or time from another time space reality, the only reason why we're tuning into it is because it's relevant to what's happening in the now moment. And is why I also like to say there's no need for you to ever have a past life reading. If I'm in session with somebody and a past life comes up, it's because I know it's relevant to something that they're currently going through, and they can apply the wisdom or lessons they learned in that lifetime in this moment, because it's all a big giant spider web and we're all connected simultaneously and sending information, whether we recognize it or not. And this is a lot of times why we have dreams, right? We move and we travel in our dream space, and we go into another timeline or another lifetime because we have already answered our question. We have already found the solution. And by going into that dream state, or by traveling into that version of us, and that's all we're doing, we're astral traveling, shifting timelines, we're quantum jumping into a different reality, we can access that information and make it applicable to this life and this moment. Because again, they're all connected. We're all working with the same lessons. We're all trying to achieve the same goal a little bit differently. I mean, think about that. There's hundreds of versions of you all trying to get to the same location and sharing that information. If you could just learn to tune into it, if you could just learn to center yourself and receive from that version of you. This is why multidimensionality is so amazing once you start to discern and learn how to use it. But this is why, people like me, I'm not the only one who helps teach this stuff, but why we're going to be so important coming in the future, because a lot of people are going to think they're going crazy. They're going to need help learning how to discern. They're going to need help learning how to tune into those versions of themselves. They're going to have to learn how to trust, how to believe, how to have faith, how to surrender, how to let go. All very hard lessons I've had to learn over the years. But that wisdom from that very visceral experience that I had, I can now help someone else to not suffer. And suffering comes from attachment. And help them to learn how to utilize their multidimensionality to serve them and to help them instead of hinder them or make them feel like they're losing their marbles. Again, are you losing your mind, or did you lose your mind? Are you going crazy, or are you surrendering the ego? Are you surrendering the limitations of the physical mind? Logic has its place in the human world, and we can still utilize the brain. We will always have utilization of the brain for the very physical, dense things that we need to do that require that. But you can still lose your mind in a good way while utilizing your mind in a good way. Or you can let yourself feel like you're going crazy and manic and spiral. And I had a manic episode this morning. And for me, it's those moments I'm very aware when I'm having them. Like even when I'm super sad, and I've shared many times on this podcast about ego deaths, I'm very aware of what's happening. There's the version of me that's very aware of what's happening, that it's a good thing is happening also while I'm experiencing the ego death and afraid of dying. So again, you're experiencing multiple versions of yourself in multiple realities simultaneously. And for me, it's been a godsend. For me, observing it's very easy and natural for me. But because of that, that has saved my life. I can't tell you how many times, because I could also tune into the awareness and the version of me that knows what's actually happening and not let it take me down. So it's really important for us to be able to learn how to do that, right? To be able to hold that discernment and be able to hold those multiple versions of ourselves, and not go crazy. But this morning, again, like I was saying, um, I had a little bit of an episode where I could feel this version of myself that's done. I'm done. It's over. I want to chop every time I'm done, I want to chop all my hair off. I want to chop all my hair off. I want to change it drastically. Everything has to change. It's all done. Everything's over. And this version of me has been coming up over the last month, over and over. I've been seeing 999 constantly. And I've just been feeling this energy of I'm done. It's over. But it's almost like it's a graduation, right? I've graduated. I have passed the test. I have passed the level, and I don't need to hold on to this version of me anymore. I can let it go. And the physical part of that is feeling like I need to have a physical change, right? So I feel like I need to cut my hair. I feel like I need to move. I feel like I need to change my wardrobe. And because that energetic version of me is now integrating, I am morphing and becoming and stepping into another version of me. And sometimes we don't have the awareness completely of the new version of ourselves. We're getting to know it the same way you get to know a new person in a relationship. We're getting to know the new version of us. And so we have to experiment a little bit. How do I want to wear my hair? How do I want to dress now? How do I want to speak? Where do I want to live? How do I want to be in relationship? What do I want to do for a living? What do I want to do for fun? So it's the same way you're getting to know a new person. You have to get to know the new version of you. But this morning I had one of those episodes and I was feeling it and just letting it be expressed, but I knew what it was, right? I knew what it was. And so I didn't be drastic and chop all my hair, though I did recently change my hair, cut my hair, color my hair. But, I have these moments of where I want to do these drastic changes. And it just means that there's drastic energetic changes happening inside of me. And so I felt like this conversation was super important. And I tried to keep it as simple as I possibly could. But at the end of the day, what's most important to understand is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And the only thing that you are here to do is to get the fuck out of your own way, is to clear the triggers, the limits, the trauma that comes up as you are constantly being realigned to the highest version of yourself and choosing to learn to tune in and align to that highest version of yourself and start to embody that version. And this is something that, again, I do in private mentorship, and something that I firmly believe is important, and why I think we're always going to have mentors of some sort, whether that mentor is a coach, right, or a spiritual teacher like what I do, or that mentor is a relationship or a child or an opportunity that you had. Mentoring can look many different ways. The whole point of mentoring is to be held while you're practicing and experiencing these things, to be held and guided at the same time. So mentoring can look very differently. But the only way that anybody is going to become that next version of themselves is going through the embodiment process. And that requires you to feel everything that you are not, while simultaneously practicing being everything that you are. Because as you do those practices, it's going to push on everything that you are not, and you're going to have to feel it. Otherwise, you just keep trying to go forward and keep getting sucked back down into the old version of you. And that's okay too. But it's through that practice and awareness that pretty soon you stop falling in the hole. And pretty soon you start to aware that there's a fucking hole there. And then as you walk by the hole, you feel everything that's inside of the hole, which then closes the hole. and becomes foundation for you to walk across and not fall into anymore. If you have any questions about living multidimensionally or having the awareness that, you know, all of these versions of you are happening simultaneously and they're all overlays, they're not higher or lower than you, it's just an expanded state. If you have any questions about this, please drop it in the underneath the podcast. There's a spot where you can make comments and maybe it will spark further conversation. And I will see you guys in the next episode.